and welcome. My name is Ibrahim Abdusalam and I'm a petroleum geoscientist by practice and also by qualification. Today we'll be talking about something which is pretty much technical, I would like to say. However, I will do my best to make this as insightful, as educative, and as simple in the basic purest form as it can get. Right, so we'll be talking about electrophases, and in this I mean deciphering depositional environments from electrical logs within a clastic or deltaic setting. Right, so we are restricting it to a deltaic setting. But let's take it from the basic. What exactly is a depositional environment? A depositional environment is an environment that has fulfilled all necessary conditions for sediments to deposit or accumulate. And these conditions are biological, physical, or chemical. Right, so you must fulfill all these conditions for sediment to deposit. So we're talking electrophases, but let's take it to the basics again. What are facies? So a facies or facies is a body of rock with a distinctive characteristics that distinguishes it from adjacent rocks. And Johannes Walters confirmed this in the Walters Law of Facies Association, where he stated that vertical succession of facies reflects variation in depositional environment. So this tells us that from rock A at point A, moving away from that rock laterally, or as you like, there will be changes in the way that rock or those rocks would appear. Right, so that is what Johannes Walters confirmed about facies associations. Moving on, facies could be lithofacies, so it means you are describing them based on their lithic or physical properties. Biofacies, meaning you are describing them based off on their biological components, or it would be hypnofacies, meaning you are describing them based on their trace fossil content. It could be electrophases, like we're talking about. It could be seismofacies, which we will talk about, right? So typically, these are what facies are about. So lithic or lithophacy is describing them based off on their physical appearance, like I said. For instance, say false bedded sandstone. For biofacies, like saying fossiliferous sandstone or biotubated sandstone, as you like. And for trace-based fossils, you could call it maybe stromatolitic sandstone. That is distinguishing them based on distinctive characteristics. So that's what facies are in basic term. Moving on, I'll just be describing some terms that will be very useful in this video typically. So when talking about depositional environments, you'll be hearing things like progradation, aggradation, retrogradation, and even degradation in some cases. And these words, when you hear them, they are associated with fluvial system, right? Meaning river system. When you hear prograding, it means forward building, right? Or basinward building, right? And this occurs when the rate of sediment supply exceeds what that system can take, leading to forward building. You have retrogradation, which is the inverse, right? So you have backward building, meaning the rate of sediment supply is far less than what that system can take. You have aggradation or aggrading, that is upward building. You have degradation, the inverse of aggradation, of course, right? You also have things like transgressive, regressive. When you hear regressive, you are referring to what the marine does. When you hear transgressive, it means that the marine has moved landward, that's transgressed. When you hear regressive, it means that the marine setting has moved seaward again. Typically, that is what it is. So gradation is associated with fluvial or river system, and regressive is associated with marine settings. And typically, this type of depositional system or patterns is associated with deltaic, right? And that's why we say our very own Niger Delta is a prograding as well as a regressive delta, right? So some other terms I'll just be defining for you is rate of sediment supply. That's just the amount of sediment that is supplied at a given time, right? Then you have space or accommodation. That's just the amount of available space or amount of space that system can accumulate sediment into, something of such. That's what accommodation can be or be defined to be, right? So this is going to be more of a hands-on thing, so let's get to it.
All right, so let's get to it. So for many of us, when we see something like this, to us it is reservoir, non-reservoir, reservoir, non-reservoir, or in a deltaic setting, sand shale, which is typically true. But in terms of trying to carry out electrophagy analysis or deciphering depositional environments from electrical logs, it goes a bit beyond that. So moving on quickly, when you see a log signature with low gamma ray reading, it actually tells us about a non-radioactive medium, which is a very big characteristics of sands. And when we see one with higher gamma ray readings, it's telling us about probably a shell or something that is highly radioactive, right? When carrying out electrophysiology analysis, you have that at the back of your mind, right? So when you see something with low gamma ray reading, it's actually telling you about a porous and permeable medium or body of rock, right? Which is typically associated with sands. And this porous and permeable medium must have been deposited under high energy, right? Which is typical of fluvial systems or river systems, something carrying huge chunks or something that is capable of pushing plastics or detrital materials from hinterlands to the basin where they will be deposited, right? And when you see something with little shaly incursions like this, it tells you that there was little to no marine incursions at this time, right? So in similar vein, when you see something with higher gamma ray reading, it's telling you the inverse, that this is something that was deposited under low energy, very quiet energy, right? And this is telling you that this medium may be porous and non-permeable, right? Possibly. Now, typically you have strata B down, which is typically almost a replica of strata A, right? So it equally tells you that it is a porous and equally permeable body of rock which must have been deposited under high energy environments, and it has little to no marine incursions. When you see this type of signatures, it's typically telling you about an environment that is most likely transitional, somewhere between continental and marine, because you could see evidences of marine deposits and you could see evidences of fluvial or river deposits. So this may be telling you something about a transitional environment, typically maybe in this case a deltaic environment. So this is basically how we use depositional we use logs to decipher depositional environments or systems in very, very basic terms. We'll be taking it further with the next scenario-based example. Okay, so typically this is another illustration, was a bit different from the first one that we looked at, in the sense that it's been integrated with bulk density log and also with what we call the photoelectric factor log, which is just a lithology or a matrix indicator, and it's just like a support kind of log for the primary suite of logs that we have. And on this side, we have the core data or the geologic interpretations that was taken from this well, so to say. Right, so we have a sand here, which has a low gamma ray reading. And like we said, it's something that it's typically probably porous and permeable, was deposited under high energy and has little to no marine incursions. But if we integrate this bulk density log to it, we could see that around where we have the sand or the low gamma ray reading, we equally have a low density relative to what we have where we have these shaly regions, which is higher. So typically this low density might be indirectly related to higher porosity, because if we can relate density to porosity, we may have higher porosity around these regions and lower porosity around these regions, right? And moving on to strata B, we could see that we have a sand which is typically having shale incursions, and we could see that where we have the cleaner sands around these regions, we have lower densities, and as we get into the shaly regions, we have these spikes depicting that we have higher density readings around these regions, and the density readings equally drop as we move back into this lump of sand below these shale streaks, and as we move fully into the shale, we have higher density readings. This might be indicative of something that is more porous and permeable, having lower readings, and higher density readings may indicate the inverse. Moving on, we could also integrate it with this photoelectric factor log, and typically any reading in bands per electron greater than 2, we could typically consider it as not a sand or a shale. So you could see that here we have it to be around 2. As we get into the shaly region, we have it around 3. As we come back into the sand, it drops to about 2. And around these shale streaks here, we have it spiking up around here to about 3. And it drops back to about 2 before it fully goes to about 3 in the lower shaly regions. It is very important that I would state that carrying out electrophysiology analysis or analyzing electrical logs are actually indirect measurement, and there is a possibility that findings or analysis may be anomalous. But if you have core data and you're able to integrate it with core data is a more direct or a direct measurement, and they're actually ground truth because they are telling you about what the geology is saying completely. So if we're able to integrate our readings with this core data we have, we could see that this actually is a sand, right? And of course, you expect that it should have some high level of porosity and permeability. Here we have shale, right, which corresponds. Here we have a shaly sand or a sandy shale, as you may like. Here, meaning we have shale and sands occurring together, right, which is somewhat what the log was trying to depict to us. And here we have a complete shale just below this region here. So it's typical for you to always use an integrative approach when deciphering depositional environment. Next, we'll be looking at stacking patterns, and we'll be looking at more examples about how we can apply electrophysics to what we do as earth scientists or geoscientists. All right, so we'll just be talking about log motifs and how to make sense of some signatures that we observe on logs and what they tell us about their positional environments. I'll not be able to tell you all about it, but I'll tell you some important things about it. So typically, first off, we have blocky, or what we call serrated, and this is typical of an aggrading system, and this is known as upward building. So this occurs when sediments build upward or in an upward manner, and what you would observe on the log will be a blocky signature. And this tells us that at this point in time there was little to no influx of any marine sediments or no marine incursions. But serrated is the inverse. It's equally upward building, but here you have some influx of marine incursions occurring at this region, as you will observe here. Next up, we have what we call coarsening upward, which many earth scientists call the funnel shape, right? Because you could see it looks like a funnel shape. And this is typical of a prograding system, and progradation means building forward, or forward building, or basinward building, I beg your pardon. And this occurs when the sediment supply exceeds what that space or that system can take, right? And what you have in this case is progradation, right? And the log response you would see is this coarsening upward motif on the log, and it tells you that that system is prograding. Equally, we have what we call the bell shape, and this is typical of a retrograding system, and this is backstepping, so it is backward building, and the inverse of progradation is retrogradation, and this occurs when sediment supply is less than what that system can take. Then in that case you have retrogradation. And equally, it's almost like a boomer sequence, so it's a boomer sequence. And when you see a fanning upward system, it's telling you that there was a lot of fluvial deposits at the base, and as you move towards the top, there was a lot of marine deposition going on around this part. Why this is the inverse: at the base here there was a lot of marine deposition going on around this part, and as you move towards the top, a lot of fluvial activities occurred around this part. What it tells you is that there was complete fluvial activities going on around this part, and where you have this is telling you that there was fluvial activities, but there was intermittent marine activities going on that deposited these shale streaks that we have in these areas around here.